He called it just a formality when I signed the contract 15 years ago. Back then, we didn't even have chairs that matched, and the AC unit whined like a dying goat every time someone used the microwave. We were four people squeezed into a broom closet office above a payday loan place, one whiteboard, two space heaters, and zero backup plans. But I had an idea. A real one. And in a world full of recycled pitches and Silicon Valley smoke, I had blueprints that actually worked. I still remember the smell of that place, burnt instant coffee, electrical fire waiting to happen, and the sour musk of ambition soaked into old carpet. I built my first prototype in that hellhole with parts scavenged off eBay and a soldering iron that shocked me every third use. But it worked. It worked. And that ugly little box turned into patent hash 1. Then came hash 2 and hash 3. By year 5, I was up to 16 patents, all of them filed under the company's name, with my name tagged as original inventor, of course. That detail will matter later. They gave me a title eventually, lead inventor. No office, no team, but a fancy plaque and enough freedom to keep doing what I did best, build things that made money. And oh, did they make money. The licensing deals started small, one pharma lab here, one automation firm there. Soon the big boys came sniffing. Defense contracts, manufacturing giants, a few Silicon Valley titans pretending they weren't interested but sending research interns to every damn demo I hosted. By the 10th year, the company wasn't a startup anymore. We had 3 floors downtown, an espresso machine that cost more than my first car, and HR policies longer than the Constitution. But through it all, I stayed heads down. Never wanted to be a C-suite suit. Didn't care for stock options or company retreats. Just give me a lab, a budget, and enough time to make something worth filing. And I did, again and again. Patent hash 27 reduced assembly costs for our clients by 19%. Patent hash 31 improved safety compliance so dramatically OSHA sent us a thank you letter. Hash 34, that one's the crown jewel. An adaptive process flow that basically let any manufacturer switch production lines on the fly without shutting down. That one alone secured $280 million in new contracts. The press called it revolutionary. I called it Tuesday. I wasn't flashy. I didn't do interviews. Hell, I barely remembered to shower some days. But I was the backbone, the engine, and everyone knew it. Not in a billboard or TED stage kind of way, no. In the quiet glances during earnings calls, in the way the CFO always made sure I was looped in on compliance docs, in how legal kept my claws iron tight when acquisitions circled. Because here's the thing they never say out loud in these places. Without innovation, you're just burning investor money until someone catches on. And I was the damn fire starter. They built an empire on my patents, and I never once missed a filing deadline. Never once took a shortcut that would have risked a claim challenge. Everything I touched was locked down, watertight, and forward compatible. The tech worked. The contracts held, and the company thrived. I should have seen it coming. The shift. It always starts the same. Someone mentions scaling faster. Then the branding changes, new logo, new slogan, new leadership vision. Old faces disappear. Board meetings get longer. Legal reviews get slower. And somewhere in all of that noise, forget or pretend to forget who built the damn engine that's still keeping the lights on. But in those early days before the knives came out, I was proud. Proud of the work. Proud of the team we'd built. Proud that something I created in a rented storage unit was now keeping thousands of people employed. I had no reason to doubt them. I wasn't chasing a title. I wasn't trying to own the company. I just wanted to build things that mattered and be left the hell alone. Turns out that was my first mistake. I knew something was off the moment I saw his shoes. Polished like a casket lid and twice as shiny, stepping off that private elevator like he owned the oxygen in the building. Everyone stood when he walked in except me, not out of protest. I was just busy trying to stop one of our test rigs from overheating. You know, actually doing something useful. He introduced himself with that slippery, rehearsed kind of charm that leaves your skin feeling sticky even hours later. "Call me Marcus," he said, like we were going to be bros. Like 15 years of blood, patents, and busted knuckles could be reset with a LinkedIn handshake and a first-name policy. Marcus was an acquisition hire, dragged in by the new parent company to streamline innovation and enhance scalability. Translation: make things cheaper, faster, and shinier so some hedge fund could slap it in a deck and milk the valuation. He had a background in sales, which meant he knew how to talk like he knew what he was doing. Problem was he didn't. His resume was stacked with buzzwords and bankruptcies. The kind of guy who'd trademark the phrase thought architecture and call it a deliverable. Still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. First week, he toured the labs, nodded like a bobblehead, asked weird questions like, "Can we make this more viral?" About a damn torque stabilizer. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Week 2, I noticed something else. Meetings started popping up on the calendar without my name on them. Strategy syncs, product rollouts, budget reviews. I'd email to clarify and get polite brush-offs, not essential this time, but we'll loop you in later. Later never came. Then my lab budget was halved. No explanation. Just a line in a spreadsheet with reallocation for marketing initiatives next to it. I went to my direct report, well, my former direct report, since apparently the new org chart had turned me into some floating special projects advisor without the courtesy of telling me. She looked embarrassed, said it came from Marcus, said it was temporary. I asked if anyone had told Marcus that our next-gen prototype needed that budget to finish trials. She just looked at her coffee cup like it held the answers. By the end of the month, they'd reassigned two of my engineers to a new innovation pod led by some fresh-faced guy who used the phrase design thinking in every sentence. They didn't even tell me. It came up when I walked into the lab and found their desks empty, names scrubbed off the Kanban board like they never existed. That's when I started documenting everything. Quietly, meticulously, every skipped meeting, every budget cut, every asset shifted without my sign-off. I wasn't angry yet, just alert, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air goes still and you can smell the rain coming. Then there was the presentation, quarterly review. I'd submitted a detailed progress report on patent hash 35, a process enhancement that could cut production downtime by 11%. Instead of using my slides, Marcus clicks into some shiny PowerPoint full of stock photos and vague nonsense. My name, not mentioned. The patent, rebranded as Next Phase Optimization with a smiling photo of Marcus on the title slide like he'd dreamt it up between Zoom calls. I sat in the back row, jaw tight, knuckles white around my coffee cup. I didn't say a word, just watched him lie through his perfect veneers. The worst part wasn't that he stole credit, it was how easily the board nodded along. They didn't care who made the engine, just that the car kept moving. And Marcus was a hell of a driver when it came to looking busy while coasting on other people's work. The team noticed. Some whispered apologies in the hallway. One of my old engineers left me a sticky note that said, "This place doesn't deserve you." I folded it up and kept it in my wallet. By month 3, I was barely invited to my own demos. I'd walk past glass conference rooms and see Marcus pitching my tech to investor groups, laughing like it was all a game. And maybe it was to him. But to me, this company wasn't a ladder. It was the forge I'd poured myself into. Every patent, every line of code, every sleepless night, I didn't just work here. I was here, and now I was being erased one meeting at a time. I could have fought back, kicked and screamed, demanded respect, but I didn't, not yet. Because Marcus thought he was winning, and I needed him to keep thinking that. Let him believe I was just some burnt-out R&D ghost too meek to matter. Let him think I'd go quietly. He waited until the quarterly board meeting to do it because of course he did. Marcus didn't just want to remove me, he wanted an audience. The room was prepped like a stage, polished walnut table, fresh bottled water with the labels turned just so, little triangular nameplates like we were hosting a corporate séance. The board was there, scattered in their ergonomic thrones, half of them on tablets, the other half pretending they weren't checking stock tickers on their phones. Marcus stood at the head of the table like a ringmaster in a $2,000 suit, grinning like he was about to pull a rabbit out of his overpriced ass. "Before we dive into Q3 projections," he said, flipping through a manila folder with theatrical precision, "there's a small bit of legacy housekeeping we need to address." He reached under the table and pulled out my original paper contract. My contract, signed back when we didn't have a legal department and had to use a template pulled off a business law blog. I recognized the coffee stain on the bottom corner. My signature, slightly crooked from signing it in the middle of a Red Bull crash. I had that paper scanned and backed up 6 ways to Sunday. Still, seeing it in his smug little paws made something in my jaw twitch. "This is what loyalty is worth," he announced, holding the contract up like a dead rat. Then he shredded it, not symbolically, not theoretically. Literally. A portable paper shredder was plugged into the wall behind him, and he fed it an inch by inch, looking me dead in the eye the entire time. Every few seconds he'd pause, tilt his head like a golden retriever learning sarcasm, then continue feeding the document to its death. "You've had a good run, Todd," he said, voice syrupy with condescension. "But let's be honest, R&D needs fresh energy. New blood, people who understand today's pace. Not someone coasting off yesterday's ideas." The blade word, the paper disappeared, and the room went quiet except for the sound of my own heartbeat doing double time in my ears. "We appreciate your legacy contributions," he added, using air quotes like he was giving a eulogy for a fax machine. "But moving forward, your services are no longer required." There it was. Fired, no meeting, no heads up, no HR liaison clutching a pamphlet titled Your Transition Plan. Just death by shredder, delivered with a smirk in a glass tomb full of cowards. The board didn't clap, but some of them chuckled, nervous little laughs, like they weren't sure if this was a joke or just a really edgy reorg. One of them, a guy I once shared a conference room sandwich with during a 14-hour compliance call, looked at me, then immediately looked away like eye contact might get him demoted. I didn't move, I didn't speak. I just nodded once, slow and deliberate, like a man marking the time of death. Humiliation soaked into the pores of that room, but it didn't touch me. Not really. As what Marcus didn't know, what not a single soul in that boardroom realized, was that the paper he'd just destroyed was a museum relic. A backup. A dead skin I'd shed long ago. The real contract, the one with the claws, that one lived elsewhere. And in that clause, buried on page 12, subparagraph C under intellectual property rights and breach protocols, was the key to every single one of my patents. I stood slowly, adjusted my jacket like I wasn't seething, and said the only words I spoke that day, noted. Then I walked out of the room, no shouting, no threats. Just one last glance at the shredder still humming quietly behind Marcus like it hadn't just made the biggest mistake of his career. He thought I'd walk away broken, that I'd crawl back with a severance package in my teeth. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, is that I didn't need the paper. I had the code. It started in year 3, back when the company was still too small to afford an in-house lawyer and too arrogant to admit it. We just landed our first real contract, nothing flashy, just a mid-tier robotics firm that wanted to license my second patent for industrial automation. But it came with a stipulation, proof of clear ownership, clean chain of custody, no gray areas, no we'll figure it out later. That forced us to look under the hood, and what we found wasn't great. The original IP clauses were generous, to say the least. Vague language, gaps big enough to drive a lawsuit through. That's when I realized I needed to armor up. I hired my own lawyer out of pocket. His name was Eric, and he looked like a retired boxer in a thrift store blazer. Bald, quiet, always smelled like mint gum and cold printer toner. But the man was a killer. We met in a diner once a week, booth by the window, always ordered the same greasy hash browns, and worked through every clause like it was a ticking time bomb. And eventually we rewrote my contract. Line by line, word by word. One clause, buried toward the back, labeled IP reversion in event of breach, became the sword I'd spend the next decade quietly sharpening. Eric explained it like this: if they fire you clean, they keep the goods. But if they breach the terms, any terms, everything you created reverts back to you. All patents, all licenses, all proprietary derivatives. We didn't just put it in writing. We filed it through a third-party digital notary system, one of the first to use blockchain timestamping. Immutable, uneditable. It lived on 3 servers, 2 continents, and 1 offline backup drive inside a fireproof safe at Eric's house. We never talked about it again after it was signed. Didn't need to. It was insurance. Quiet, heavy, and invisible until someone crashed the car. Over the years, the company grew and shifted. New contracts, new lawyers, new leadership. They pushed updated employee agreements, new NDAs, digital onboarding systems that buried terms under 15 screens of click to agree. But I never clicked, never signed. My original contract remained untouched. Legal always blinked first. They knew better than to poke that bear. Even when the acquisition happened, Marcus started tightening the screws, I said nothing. Just watched as he danced his little power waltz, imagining himself a visionary while I sat 2 moves ahead with a quiet smile and a clause that could strip him of everything he thought he controlled. Because here's the secret no one talks about in boardrooms full of buzzwords. Contracts aren't shields, they're swords. And this one? This one was a scalpel made of pure vengeance. Every patent I filed, the process flows. Automation modules, the modular manufacturing integrations, they were registered with me as the original inventor. The company held rights under license. Conditional license. That condition being no breach of contract. And Marcus, bless his glossy-headed ego, had just turned a symbolic firing into a legal landmine by publicly shredding the only paper version of my contract while announcing I was no longer required without due process. Breach of contract. Documented, witnessed. I called Eric that night, told him what happened. He didn't say a word at first, just sipped his coffee, then chuckled, dry and low, like a man watching a domino wobble before the collapse. All right, he said, let's open the vault. Next morning, he filed the breach notice with a certified timestamp. Attached were the original digitally signed contract, the notarized reversion clause, and a side-by-side compliance audit that made it clear they'd not only breached, they'd nuked the bridge. We didn't send it to Marcus. Not yet, we sent it to legal. Their internal team first, just to watch the panic bloom quietly. Then we CC'd their outside counsel, white shoe firm, New York office, $1,200 an hour panic button types. It took less than 24 hours for them to reply. Their tone, not aggressive, not dismissive. Nervous, they asked for clarification. A meeting, time to review. Eric replied with a PDF. Paragraph 7, subsection C. In the event of termination deemed in breach of contract, all registered patents credited to the original inventor shall revert to said inventor with full rights of use, licensing, and transfer without financial obligation to the former employer. Underneath, the blockchain signature. Date stamped, geo-locked, fingerprint ID embedded. Silence that followed wasn't accidental. It was stunned. They hadn't just fired me. They'd blown out the foundation of the company's entire IP portfolio. And me? I didn't gloat, didn't post cryptic messages on LinkedIn or send told you so text to anyone on the inside. I just went for a walk. The air smelled different that day, like rain on concrete and overdue consequences. They thought they could bluff it out. 3 days after Eric filed the breach notice, company released a press statement. Some PR fluff about leadership evolution and seamless operational continuity. Not a word about patents, not a whisper about breach. But between the lines, it reeked of damage control sprayed with lavender corporate optimism. The kind that tries to smother fire by talking over the smoke. I read it while stirring creamer into my coffee. Vanilla caramel, same as always. My phone buzzed, Eric again. They're stalling, he said. Gulls slow rolling, hoping you flinch first. I didn't flinch. Inside the company, chaos had already started to simmer. The production floor ran on software modules tied directly to my latest systems. Process hash 18, load balancing for multi-arm robotics, was locked behind an authorization key that only I held. They'd never bothered to rotate it because no one thought I'd ever leave. They tried bypassing it, but the patch failed and triggered a safety lockout. One line halted for 6 hours. 6 hours at $24,000 an hour. That got attention. Then came the licensing audits. Our biggest partner in Germany flagged a clause in their contract stating they required ongoing certification from the original patent holder, me, to continue manufacturing with tech derived from patent hash 26. No cert, no compliance. No compliance, no shipment. Their legal team fired off an email requesting confirmation. That email came to me. Not the company, not legal, me. I didn't answer, not yet. Marcus, meanwhile, kept strutting through all-hands meetings like a home shopping network host, hyping new verticals and synergies no one understood. Internally, I heard whispers through back channels. Engineers texting me late at night, is it true you're gone? Did he really fire you like that? They said everything's fine, but, always but. Legal tried to respond to our notice with vague language. We dispute the interpretation of the clause. We believe the termination was conducted in accordance with company policy. No mention of the shredded contract. No mention of the boardroom stunt. Just legalese with enough passive voice to dodge a deposition. Eric sent a second message. This time, we attached not just the original contract, but the metadata from the blockchain notarization, a full list of the 34 patents in question, and a reminder that public misrepresentation of intellectual property could trigger regulatory review and civil penalties. We added a footnote suggesting we'd already had preliminary conversations with 2 federal compliance auditors. That's when the emails stopped. Outwardly, they kept pretending nothing had changed. But internally, you could feel the storm pressurizing. I could smell it, that nervous sweat that seeps into the seams of a sinking ship. And just like blood and water, it drew the sharks. First, a manufacturing rival I hadn't spoken to in 6 years sent an invite to grab lunch and catch up. Then a private equity firm called Eric directly, asking whether the patents were currently encumbered. A tech startup, young, well-funded, aggressive, offered me a consulting role with 7 zeros on the back end if I brought my inventions with me. It didn't even pretend to be subtle. The scent of weakness had gone airborne. I let the calls roll to voicemail. Let the offers stack up like poker chips while the company flailed behind the scenes. Every day they didn't respond, I gained leverage. Every hour of downtime, every client email asking who owns this tech actually widened the crack in their foundation. They thought I'd come crawling back for a settlement. I was building a war chest. One of their VPs finally called me, said they wanted to get clarity on the nature of the dispute. I told him to direct all inquiries to Eric, then asked how his kid's soccer team was doing, just to remind him I still remembered the people behind the machines. He sounded tired, really tired. I almost felt bad, almost, because the company kept moving forward like they could pretend me out of existence, like they could fire the architect and still live in the house without paying rent. But what they hadn't realized yet was that the deed was in my name, and every step they took now was trespassing. It hit their inboxes at 9:01 a.m. on a Monday, because that's when corporate arrogance is at its peak. Right after they've finished their $7 cold brew, and just before they're fully awake enough to recognize the fire about to land in their lap. Subject line, notice of contractual breach and activation of patent reversion clause. Eric's email was clean, surgical. A full PDF package, the breach summary, the notarized contract with blockchain hash verification, a clause-by-clause breakdown of the termination failure, and a final page listing all 34 patents with their registration numbers, current licensing status, and market valuations. It was less a letter and more a digital guillotine. Marcus's reply came 34 minutes later. I'm not sure what fantasy world you think this clause operates in, but your client was an at-will employee and was terminated in accordance with internal HR procedures. We will not be intimidated by false claims. This matter is closed. I read it while sipping my second coffee. Smiled. Eric didn't respond, not directly. Instead, he BCC'd outside counsel. Their outside counsel. That changed everything. See, corporate in-house lawyers are mostly shield jockeys. Their job is to stall, deflect, run out the clock. But once outside counsel gets looped, especially from a firm billing $1,200 an hour, the game changes. They don't waste time, because their clock is running too, and they know where the tripwires are buried. 4 hours later, we got a call from someone named Griffin Marks, senior partner at the kind of law firm that handles tech lawsuits large enough to move stock prices. His voice was clipped, controlled, and deeply annoyed. I've reviewed the materials, he said. The clause appears enforceable. Eric didn't gloat, just said yes, it does. There was a pause, then, this was not disclosed during due diligence. No shit, Griffin. I imagine Marcus standing in his corner office, sleeves rolled up like he just got done pretending to understand a supply chain diagram, probably laughing off the whole thing as some overblown HR dust-up. Until Griffin forwarded him the clause. I know the moment it hit him. Probably leaned back in his stupid leather chair, the one he had installed with lumbar massage settings because thinking is tension. Probably clicked the PDF with one smug eyebrow raised, until he got to paragraph 7, subsection C. In the event of termination deemed in breach of contract, all registered patents credited to the original inventor shall revert to said inventor, with full rights of use, licensing, and transfer, without financial obligation to the former employer. There it was, not buried, not vague, just cold, clear law. We didn't hear from Marcus directly after that. But suddenly, emails from legal took on a new tone. Fewer adjectives, more questions. They wanted to clarify intent, to schedule a mutual resolution session, to discuss ongoing ownership parameters. Too late. By the end of the week, the company issued a temporary operational pause on 3 production lines, all reliant on tech tied directly to my patents. The German client pulled back on their Q4 order. Internal Slack messages leaked to me from sympathetic engineers, people panicking, asking why systems were suddenly inaccessible, why legal was locking down internal dev environments, why a compliance team was reviewing all patent deployment logs. One of those messages just said, "Does this mean we don't own the tech?" Bingo. Marcus tried to save face in the next town hall. "Some former employees are making exaggerated claims," he said. "We're fully in control of our IP." His voice cracked halfway through the word control. The queue and a session was abruptly cut short. One engineer I mentored for years messaged me afterward. He's sweating, like actually sweating. It was beautiful, and through it all I waited, patient, calm, watching the quiet panic unfold from the outside like a man holding a match just far enough away from the gasoline to enjoy the smell. They thought this was over. I had only just begun. The first offer came in the form of a LinkedIn message, which would have been hilarious if it hadn't had 8 zeros attached. Some recruiter at a West Coast think tank pretending to be casual. "Hey Todd, loved your work on adaptive switching protocols. Ever thought about joining a more agile environment?" Like I hadn't just detonated the legal foundation of a billion-dollar company. 2 hours later, Eric forwarded an email from a private equity group in Boston. No small talk, just a PDF titled Preliminary Terms for Exclusive IP Acquisition and a phone number that began with a 617. The number at the bottom, $22 million, up front, and that was just Monday. By Wednesday, it was a feeding frenzy. Licensing firms, robotics manufacturers, 3 tech CEOs I'd never met but who apparently had been following my work for years. One even sent a gift basket with a bottle of whiskey older than my patents. I didn't drink it, not yet. Every day, Eric and I met at the same diner where we'd hashed out the contract all those years ago. Booth by the window, hash browns and black coffee. Except now the table was covered in spreadsheets and term sheets and NDAs. I wasn't just some fired engineer anymore, I was holding a weapon. And everyone wanted a piece of it. One of the offers came from a company that had tried to buy us out 6 years ago. Marcus had called them vultures. Now they were back, feathers ruffled, grinning like cats with open checkbooks. They didn't want just a license, they wanted everything. Full acquisition of all 34 patents, plus a 2-year exclusive consultancy deal, office in Seattle, stock options, and a signing bonus that would cover a lakefront house twice over, with enough left to build a dock, a boat, and probably a moat around it if I felt paranoid. I didn't say yes, not right away, because I wasn't rushing anymore. For 15 years, I'd worked inside a machine built on urgency, shipped the next prototype, hit the next deadline, optimized the next process, always chasing someone else's clock. Now they were chasing mine. Eric loved it. He called it slow dancing with sharks. Every counteroffer we made came with longer silence on their end, and then a revised figure. One firm doubled their licensing rate overnight. Another threw in board seats and first refusal on any future IP I developed. I hadn't even agreed to anything yet, and I was already being treated like royalty. The emails from my old company slowed to a trickle. Griffin, the outside counsel, sent one terse update. "We are continuing to review the relevant clauses and exploring options." Translation, they were losing, and they knew it. Marcus, radio silence. No apology, no back-channel appeal. Just a puff of expensive cologne fading into the ether while his empire bled cash trying to untangle itself from the trap he swaggered straight into. And the irony? I wasn't even angry anymore. I felt tall, clear-headed. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting, I was choosing. I wasn't patching holes in someone else's ship, I was charting my own damn course, and the tides were in my favor. At one point, Eric leaned across the table, slid a stack of offers toward me, and said, "You know, if we played this right, you'd never have to work another day in your life." I laughed, not because he was wrong, but because I finally realized something. They didn't just fire me, they freed me. And now I was deciding who gets to pay for the privilege of using what I built. I didn't wear a suit. I figured if they were going to see the ghost of their mistakes, I might as well look like myself: dark jeans, work boots, a button down that still smelled faintly of solder and caffeine. I wasn't there to impress them. I was there to finish the hand I'd been quietly playing for years. The only thing different was the leather folio I carried under my arm, the one with 34 patents, 6 offers, and a licensing contract they were going to sign. Or not. Either way, I'd win. The receptionist froze when I walked in, eyes wide, mouth parting just a little like she wasn't sure if she should call security or start crying. I gave her a polite nod and kept walking. No need to raise my voice. No need to announce anything. Everyone would find out soon enough. The boardroom was smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was always like that. Corporate spaces tend to shrink once you stop needing their approval. Same walnut table, same glass walls, same leather chairs filled with the same faces, except this time I didn't need any of them to like me. Marcus was already there. Of course he was, arms folded. Tie looser than usual, sleeves rolled up like he'd been fighting fires all morning. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in 3 days, and for once I believed it. "Todd," he said with a strained smile, "appreciate you coming in. Let's clear the air, shall we?" I didn't sit. Just placed the folio on the table, opened it, and slid 2 documents forward. One labeled patent licensing agreement. The other, statement of intent to transfer IP portfolio. "Two paths," I said, calm as a surgeon. "You license the tech at my rates under my terms, or I accept one of the half-dozen offers on the table, some from your competitors, some from those vultures you warned me about years ago." I let the last word hang in the air. The room went still. One board member, a finance guy with a face like a sun-dried prune, leaned forward. "We'd need time to review. You've had time," I cut in gently. "You had time the day Marcus shredded my contract like it was a joke. You had time when your lawyers got the reversion notice. You had time every single day you delayed responding, hoping I'd blink." I looked directly at Marcus. "I don't blink." The CFO, a woman I'd always respected until she ghosted me during the fallout, cleared her throat. "How much are we talking about?" I tapped the licensing agreement. $7 million up front. Annual license fee, 25% of net profits derived from all products using the patents. Term is 5 years, renewable. Any lapse in payment or attempt to reassign the tech without written consent nullifies the agreement. Marcus scoffed. "You're extorting us." "No," I said, smiling thin. "You're leasing what you don't own. The alternative is you explain to your shareholders why your core tech stack is now controlled by a man you fired in front of this very table." He went pale. I watched it happen in real time, his jaw tightened, eyes scanning the room, looking for allies who weren't there anymore. Even the board members who chuckled during my public execution were suddenly staring at the papers like they might combust on contact. One of them whispered something to another. I didn't catch it. I didn't need to. This wasn't a debate. It was a reckoning. "You built this company on my work," I continued, "and you thought cutting me loose meant cutting the cost. But now you either pay the full price or you watch me sell to the very people you've spent the last decade trying to outmaneuver." No one spoke. The silence wasn't tense. It was terminal. Eventually, one of the board members, a quiet guy from legal, reached forward and pulled the licensing agreement toward himself. "We'll need to reconvene privately." I nodded, of course. I closed the folio, turned, and walked out. No threats, no raised voices, no need for theatrics, because power doesn't scream, it waits. And they knew, every single one of them, that I wasn't asking anymore. I was giving them a chance. One last time. It took them 47 minutes. That's how long the board sat behind closed doors, arguing over how much face they could save while hemorrhaging leverage. I imagine Marcus tried to bluff again, to sneer and stall and posture his way through it, but this time, even his charm couldn't plug the hole he'd torn in their hull. Because no matter how he spun it, the facts were now carved in granite. I owned the engine. The rest was just smoke. When the doors opened, they didn't call me back in. They sent a paralegal, young, nervous, eyes darting everywhere except my face. She handed me a signed copy of the licensing agreement, all pages initialed. Ink still drying. No ceremony, no apology, just compliance. And a wire confirmation slip attached to the final page. $7 million. Same-day transfer. I stared at it for a long moment. Not in disbelief, not in joy, just a quiet exhale that had been building in my chest for 15 years. It built an empire on my mind and kicked me out of the gates like a disposable cog. And now, here they were, writing me checks just to keep the gears turning. Eric didn't even smile when I called him. Just said, "Well, it's about damn time," and asked if I wanted to grab hash browns or champagne. I told him both. By sunset, the money was in my account. I checked it once, just to see all those zeros lined up like soldiers. Then I turned my phone off, packed a small overnight bag, and drove north. The house was already waiting, glass front, cedar beams, deck that stretched over the lake like it had been poured from a dream. No neighbors, no noise, just the hush of wind moving through the trees and the slow pulse of water slapping dock posts. I hadn't even furnished the place yet, but I didn't care. I threw a folding chair on the deck, poured a drink, and sat down barefoot as the last light of day bled into the horizon. That moment, that was the reward, not the money, not the contract. But this: silence, ownership, freedom, no more stolen meetings. No more credit mongers piggybacking off my work. Just me, the patents filed under my name again, and a company that now paid me for the right to continue existing. Marcus's name never came up again. He kept his job for now. But I imagine every product roadmap, every new launch, every investor call from this day forward will have a quiet footnote attached. License from the man we fired. I don't need revenge. I am the reminder. The one who walked in with a folio and walked out with the keys. And as I leaned back, glass sweating in my hand, watching the lake catch the stars, I realized something strange. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel like a piece of the machine. I felt like the whole damn factory. And they'll be paying rent for the rest of their lives. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.